In October 2000, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, also called WPS, was formally initiated by the landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which recognizes the critical role of women in preventing and resolving conflicts. The evidence shows that when women participate in peace processes, outcomes improve. As one example, when women participate in peace agreements, the chances of that agreement lasting longer than 2 years is increased by 20%, and the chances of lasting longer than 15 years goes up by 35%. While the international community has largely rallied behind the WPS agenda, the reality is that women continue to be excluded from peacebuilding processes and face the devastating consequences of conflicts around the world. So what is standing in the way of progress with the WPS agenda? One possibility may be engaging men in the process and better understanding how masculinity impacts peacebuilding. This brings us to our conversation with Maho Nakayama, Director of the Peacebuilding Program at SPF. The Peacebuilding Program has been conducting joint research looking into gender equality, peacebuilding, and masculinity, based on extensive on-the-ground surveys conducted in 3 post-conflict areas in Indonesia and the Philippines. Ms. Nakayama discusses how this research illuminates new ideas about the perceptions of gender roles and masculinity and what that might mean for the future of the WPS agenda. The Peacebuilding Program at SPF has been collaborating with the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security in the US on research related to the WPS agenda. But before we dive into the findings of this research, I wanted to ask, what exactly is the WPS agenda?
What is called WPS agenda is the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and it's succeeding 9 resolutions acknowledging the important role played by women for conflict prevention, peacemaking, and peace building. It also acknowledges and asks us to pay attention to the disproportionate impact the war and conflict has upon women and girls. And since this resolution adopted in 2000, there has been so many initiatives by the international organizations, UN organizations, and the UN member states to push forward this agenda. Now there is more than 100 member states which has adopted national action plan to realize that the proposal by the WPS agenda in the national context. In addition, there has been so many evidence presented showing the interlinkages, the relationship between the conflict resumptions, outbreak of conflict, and gender equality, and also the impact of women's inclusion in peace processes. So it's already very evident that if women are involved in peace processes, peace accord will be more sustainable. Although there has been so many effort done by all these stakeholders, we think that what is intended by WPS agenda is not yet fully transformed into reality at international or regional or local level. So the question is, there has been so many effort done, but there is some kind of deadlock. And what's next to move us to the new stage to push forward this agenda?
This brings us to the research for the project this time. If you had to sum up the main goal of the research and analysis, how would you do that?
We hope that we can bring the importance of the masculinity lens to the policy discussion on WPS agenda, because we think that if we understand that what men's perceptions are and how masculinity works in preventing women's right to work outside, for example, can make us realize that what would be the substantial, the meaningful entry point for intervention. Because if we only keep empowering women, it doesn't change the structure. Therefore, we have to think about what are the avenues for the men's transformations. So on one hand, we think that we have to empower women, but on the other hand, we have to support men's transformations to realize that what is intended in WPS agenda. Another thing is that the importance of local narratives. The WPS has a very difficult task of balancing the both. One is upholding international framework and using universal language and trying to endorse the women's inclusion in peace talk. For doing that, we need international framework. But on the other hand, if we only use this universal language, you will meet with resistance from within the local society. Therefore, we have to work closely with the local stakeholders to see that what would be the entry point for the international norms to do any work. So what we did was that we collected data of 6,000 men and women from 3 post-conflict areas in Southeast Asia, Aceh, Maluku of Indonesia, and Mindanao of the Philippines, and collected data on gender equality, the gender gap, income gap, gender gap of educational attainment, or how they divide household work, or how equal the decision makings are at the household level, as well as the women's involvement in community activities, or their perceptions on gender division of labor or gender norms, and also on masculinity, who are most influential in teaching men what it means to be a man, or what do they think is important for men. And also we have asked them about the past experience of the violence during conflict times, and also their mental status, and whether or not they are satisfactory with the status of the peace building.
What were some of the main findings that came out of the survey of all of these participants?
We found out that in all of these 3 fields, majority of men in post-conflict context don't support the use of violence for any reasons. We expected that in post-conflict context that men have a very violent masculinity. In fact, that they deny the use of violence. And it's not only men, but also women who play a very important role in shaping what it means to be a masculine or the men. Spouses, the wives, or the mothers play a very important role, according to male respondents. Also, that we found out that the very important role of the household, family, and community in shaping this masculinity.
How does that play into the post-conflict resolution or into the peace-building process?
One of the problems is that in post-conflict context, that the women, although they want to pursue more the public positions or they want to have the job outside home, a significant number of women, married women, answers that they are not allowed to work. And these masculinities is related to this gatekeeping role of men. We have found that men from the higher educational background tend to disagree with the statement that married women have the same right as men to work outside. Being men who can be the breadwinner and also protector of the family, therefore they can afford women not working. That is important in the masculinity. Therefore, it can work negatively against giving the right for women to work outside. We asked the question whether or not the respondent agree with the statement that to protect women's security, men have to control movement of women outside the house. Those men who are answering, feeling the sense of insecurity of safety of women, tend to agree with this gatekeeping role more, which means that this gatekeeping role is very key in understanding the problem faced by women, and this is related to the sense of masculinity, men as being the major earner of the family, and also the sense of insecurity.
Could you tell us about how this research was carried out in the field?
We collaborated with Jakarta-based researchers. The name of the group is Integral Asia, and also the researchers, our partner from Conciliation Resources in the UK, in addition to the Georgetown University Institute for Women, Peace and Security, and designed a questionnaire to collect all these data. But also we consulted local partners, which are International Center for Aceh and Indian Ocean Studies, and also Patimura University and Mindanao State University, and also the local activists and NGO workers about whether or not the usage of language is right and relevant, and also whether or not the questions posed are relevant to collect data that we wanted. We have collected answers to the 70 questions, so that our data is just so enormous. And now that all our partners are analyzing the data from different perspectives, so Georgetown University and also Integral Asia and each local partners are looking at the data from their own perspective.
What were some other significant findings from the research?
Another argument that we bring in the paper edited by Integral is that in the past, that in the peace building, that so much effort was done to ensure the security, so that peace building funding was spent more for the compensation for the individual. However, the trauma or psychosocial problems were, for example, neglected. And also the problem of the widows or the children who are not within the circle of the former combatants network was somewhat overlooked. This is a case of Aceh, which is detrimental for the society at large in the long run, because psychosocial problem was not addressed and the perpetration of violence continued. We were able to see clearly the relationship between the past trauma during conflict times and the current ongoing violence perpetrated by men and women against family members. So we were able to see the impact of the psychosocial support. If those men and women receive psychosocial interventions, they're likely to have the better mental health status. That was confirmed, which was also very important.
Was there anything that caught you by surprise out of these results or based on the survey that was conducted?
Yes, there are so many surprising results. We found out that women themselves also agree with the patriarchal norm that men work outside and women take care of family. And also women agree with the statement that men are the leader of the family. But one thing I can say that our data shows that majority of women are also supporting these patriarchal norms. However, our local narrative shows that women are trying to exert their own influence and power at a different way, not by taking the leadership in the public sphere, but trying to influence men from back door. Or there has been so many the very subtle exercise of power of women themselves and trying to negotiate the things that are important for them, like children's affairs, without challenging the masculine norms. The fact that women themselves are in support of patriarchal norm doesn't mean that women are powerless, in fact. But if we look from outsider perspective, we were very surprised that women themselves support patriarchal norms. But if we carefully listen to local narratives, we have done the focal group discussion too, and those women are saying that there has been so many struggle within the house and trying to get something done, which are important for women, that there has been so many initiatives done by women activists in all the regions, Aceh, Maluku, or Mindanao. In fact, in Maluku, those who initiated peace process were women working for the humanitarian aid, but started the reconciliation between the Muslim and the Christian women. Also, in the formal peace processes, women's representation is very low. In reality, the women are the initiator of peace processes. So what is needed is not only counting the number of women sitting at the negotiation table, but also trying to find out where are those forums of women and where are the spaces of women's voices, and trying to connect these spaces with formal peace processes so that not only the representative but also the issues and concerns will be incorporated in the formal processes.
How did you come to focus on this topic as part of the Peacebuilding program's work?
We have some kind of the broad ideas which comes from our own experience of the activities in the field of peacebuilding or in search for the gender equality. One such example is that our experience of the conducting research on the theme of the new role of men for gender equality from 2018 was this project we have tried to investigate into the relationship between men's contribution to the household work and their perceptions of gender norms. We have collected more than 10,000 men's data from the cities, mostly in East Asia and Europe and the US. We thought that there must be the correlation between the frequency in the household work and their liberal perspective on gender norms. However, surprisingly, we found out that those men who are contributing more to the household work are likely to have more discriminatory perspective over women at workplace. What was really interesting was that we say that engaging men and boys for the agenda of gender equality, but we realized from that research experience that it is not very simple to engage men and boys for the agenda of gender equality. Therefore, we realized that we need to understand fully about what are the perceptions and the reactions of men for us to have the substantial, meaningful interventions. That was the first experience of ours with regard to the masculinity perspective. Secondly, that we have this experience of the peace-building work in southern Thailand, the conflict area in Southeast Asia, a part of Thailand bordering Malaysia. And from that experience, we had difficulty in persuading male counterparts, stakeholders, in Patani, the conflict area. This is a very traditional Muslim society which doesn't allow women to go abroad alone without being accompanied by their husband. So it has been very difficult for us to convince men and also women to attend our training programs. But gradually we were able to persuade them after building trust with so many stakeholders. And when we succeeded in bringing those women to the training abroad, the women were so much empowered, and those women became very confident in themselves in talking in public.
How do you think this experience comes into play with the WPS agenda?
We thought that the women's role in peace building is very important, significant, and started reading on this WPS literature. We also realized that the WPS literature trying to set the international framework and using universal language of gender equality. However, we realized that there should be some kind of the reactions against those use of language, because gender is a very sensitive area. And considering that the post-conflict or the ongoing conflict society in Southeast Asia, our field, mostly has a colonial history, and also the division of labor, gender division of labor, is very rigid. So in those society, if we bring this WPS agenda with universal language, there should be a resistance or the backlash for male stakeholders saying that this is something, the Western bias, and this is not what they want. So we have to be very careful in understanding the real challenges and difficulties women and men are faced with without using this universal language, is what we thought.
What are the next steps for sharing this information, and how will it be used in the field?
We are going to have the launch event first in the US and then in each locality. So first comes US and then the Mindanao and the Aceh and Maluku. And then we discuss with our local partners what kind of follow-up we can design together. So it will be like a support for the psychosocial intervention to the trauma of the conflict, or there has been ideas to incorporate WPS agenda and masculinity lens into the peace education curriculum. We also have the idea of more research to elaborate more on the local narratives and the women's experiences during conflict time. Or also we have the proposal that the intervention in the family practices, working together with religious leaders, and also teaching about gender equality education and the prevention for the domestic violence. There are so many ideas for the follow-up, so we would like to work with the local partners to think about the possibility.
That was our conversation with Maho Nakayama, Director and Senior Program Officer of the Peacebuilding Program at SPF. Visit the show notes for links to learn more about this research and other projects by the Peacebuilding Program. That's all for this episode of SPF Worldviews. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.